Hey guys, so I'm here in Mars City and we're going to take a look at Doom 3 BFG Edition's environment art. Take this guy for a walk back where he needs to go and then we'll go explore some props and things like that. Now take what I'm going to say in this video with a grain of salt because I don't know everything about this engine. Matter of fact, if you're someone that's been modifying this, you're just watching the video for the heck of it. If you know anything you want to put down in the comments, go ahead and put it down in the comments. But I did look into it a little bit, try to figure out what's going on with the engine, how it works. And so for the most part, you can see a lot of things are very low poly, right? But the textures here are not PBR textures or materials. They are diffuse workflow, and they're using specular maps and normal maps. So a lot of trim sheet action, atlas textures for the most part, seamless textures as well. This guy's gonna go down here and lay down now. Also, at this time, there is no like Quixel suite, there is no Substance Painter. This was all most likely done in Photoshop or doing high to low poly bakes, using whatever software, Max or Maya. So as we kind of wander around here, it might be a little bit challenging, but some of this might be high to low poly bake, like this guy, for example, I think is. But that's not entirely maybe accurate because it's really hard to tell sometimes on some of these assets. But most of the environment itself, these are going to be like tile sets for the most part, right? Meaning like when you look at a little section like this, it might be a like this one piece here, it might be, I don't know, 256 pixels long per se, and it might only be like 64 pixels high. And so there's a great little article that's still available on Polycount where you can go see how artists work with texture sets like this. And it's just something you might want to go check out, right? Now, we also can see here, like this texture and this texture are very similar. So some of these textures are meant to work across various assets for the walls and things like that. They're following kind of the same layout, basically. So some people call that modular trims or modular textures or whatever you want to call it. But nonetheless, you see, there are some seamless things going on as well, perhaps. It's a possibility. And it has some curious oddities as well when it comes to the textures themselves. So, for example, the diffuse texture, the base color, if you would. Supposedly, it's lightness affects how the lights actually interact with it. So it's almost like having like ambient occlusion included with it. So if you have darker pixels, supposedly the light doesn't reflect off of it, whereas like the specularity would control like the shininess of the material. You can see like up here there's a little bit of like it's almost like a roughness map of sorts, but not quite glossiness map perhaps. But yeah, as far as decals go, there are things being used that are acting something like decals, like this little end section here. It's not really modeled, I don't think. And it's like an alpha opacity type of texture, and same for the lights here. They're the same deal. These are more or less like little decals, but it's not like they're using a bunch of decals for like text everywhere and stuff like that. It's very much like the older style of doing environment art, and this type of environment art using tile sets like this. Sometimes they're atlas together, and that always goes back to like SNES days, N64, where you had sprite sheets that were atlas, so you can have Mario running or whatever. And so that was always a very common workflow that was used it's used even today, where you atlas things, obviously, right? So that out of the way, you can start to see where like some textures, they might not need to be very big. It could be like 64 pixels wide, 256 tall. Then you could have a whole bunch of detail on just one texture and all these little tile sets on it. And these are all low poly models. I mean, we're looking at like chamfered models for the most part, or squared up models. Like even this rail here, it's a square, I think. You got one edge, two edge, three edge, four edges, right? Very simple models, very low poly. And let's see if we can find some more stuff to look at. Yep. So some things do look like they're high to low poly bakes, like this one here. The only reason I suspect that is because this is supposed to be the remastered version, right? And I imagine some of these textures got remade or improved upon. Maybe they used Substance or something. I don't know. That's a possibility. But the textile density didn't really change on this one. And I'm not sure exactly why. You'd think they would improve it a little bit more than that, perhaps, but maybe it can't because of the size of the texture that it's on. Like, that's as big as it can get. Anyways, but I do know for a fact that there was some high to low poly baking going on because you can find texture skew in every now and then, right? Check this out. The keyboard from left to the center, right to the center. You see the little skew going towards the center. It does that on the other direction as well, so they're all going like up towards here. Now, it's not to say that, you know, this wasn't created by accident in Photoshop, especially if they're using photo textures. I mean, it's a possibility they just skewed it to get it into place, but a lot of times baking highs to low, that would happen. And if you're doing everything, all your texture work in Photoshop, there's a good odd chance that you're still baking high to low on some things and then mixing it with stuff you just create in Photoshop as well. So, I mean, there's any number of things that could be going on here. I can't say I can get everything correct, absolutely 100%. You know, they could have had, you know, some custom stuff like actions in Photoshop to help convert certain shapes into shapes like this, where you had little tapers to things, right? Doing those slopes like that. That's really hard to do. Just hand painting it, you'd have to use filters, and you'd have to convert them into normal maps possibly. And so this is something to think about. They were also using height maps and converting them into normal maps, and then mixing a normal with basically a normal at that point, right? So mixing a normal and a height map together, or height map that acts like a normal, so two normals basically. So this is a good one to study. It's good to kind of just walk through an environment like this and even try to create some of this stuff. It's actually really fun. I was just working in an image editor, making textures that turn into like really cool looking wall panels and stuff. Very simple and very fast, right? But, you know, today we have Substance Painter, Substance Designer. We have high to low poly bacon's much easier. You could definitely use Blender and like the Grab Doc add-on and things like that to go to town and try to create some interesting little texture sets, perhaps. Texture tiles. So a lot of sci-fi environments are heavily influenced by the lighting. So you can see like an amber light here compared to a red light, compared to a white light, or like more fluorescent light anyways. Just little slight variations in the lighting change the way the whole environment feels. This is a great example of that in here. So we got the red coming in from outside on Mars, right? But you can actually shut these blinds. This was always kind of fun, right? And then it's going to kick on the fluorescent lights, so you can see how the whole environment changes very rapidly. Now, any of you that have set up scenes inside of Blender or wherever, you already know that for the most part, but it's definitely worth checking out how different lighting situations could influence your scenes or your environments. So we look over here. Soda can's only like 6-sided cylinder, nothing crazy. The hamburger's pretty rough, but characters are also kind of rough by today's standards, right? Still has a nice feel to it, though, in my opinion. It's got kind of like a classic nostalgia feel to it now. This is literally a cube with a loop cut and scaled out. Right? We don't get a torus or half a cylinder or anything for this binder. It's just a cube that's like extruded, right? Environment art back in the day was so simple in some ways. It was about just like making things and getting things done. Sharp edges everywhere. A few objects are maybe smooth shaded. From my understanding, they're using two different types of materials in here, shaders, to do like one for characters and then one for like the static mesh. or something like that. I forgot what they were doing exactly, but you can see. I'm pretty sure most of the characters were probably went through ZBrush, perhaps. But I'm looking at that hand, that nice seam right there, right? Yeah, so it's kind of cool. It's like a little lever. There's levers in games everywhere, right? This thing's pretty wild. Wish I had a flashlight so I could turn it on and light that up. Yeah, so that's a decal. I think, unless they made two entirely different textures, which wouldn't make sense. So there might be more. There might be more decals in here than I realize. That's always a possibility. But this wall, as well, when you look at it, it looks just like the other setup over there, where you had like that middle trim kind of. That's fun. And some things still look pretty rough, like the cabling up here. Looks like they're using opacity on it. Kind of stack them and layer them in there, but that might not be true either. I don't know. They have some depth to it. Yeah, they might have a little depth to them. If not, it's just when they masked it out from a photo or whatever they did, the opacity on it, or the feathering on the edge just didn't quite get cut off all the way. Something like that. But still an excellent little example of how to lay out environments. Like, you know, we got these hallways here, but you got this machine over here that's doing whatever, running power or something to this area over here. There's obviously some maintenance going on. I'd be a little bit worried living on a Mars colony that has sparks everywhere and lights flickering. I don't know if I'd entirely trust it. Still a lot of fun to just walk around and look at it. It didn't really age that bad. Like it's obviously older. I mean, it's not gonna be a new game. But it still looks pretty decent and looks the part, right? So you can see here though, like glass, when you put a normal map on it, you always get that like refractive look to it. Things kind of fluctuate. It's kind of fun. Seen that in a lot of video games, so it's nothing new, but something that I've always liked anyways. I always thought it was a nice effect. It's also similar to how they did the water in BioShock, using normals or little shader tricks and whatnot. Alright, so I'm gonna go back to where I started. Just want to talk about one more thing out in that direction. Eventually I'll get around to doing a video on how to make these kinds of little textures like this, and I would use Krita, I think, but you could use like Photoshop or whatever. It's very easy in Krita to do things like this. I used to do all of this kind of stuff like very destructively, just making like little squares and shapes real quick and then just blurring them and stuff. You can create more or less a height map and work the appearance of the texture depth down or up. And if you're going to create a height map, then it works as a displacement map as well, basically, right? So it could work for a normal map or height, displacement, etc. If you're going to ask what the difference is between a height map and a displacement map, I really couldn't tell you. I tried looking for an official answer on this. Just the way I think of it anyways, is displacement's going to be like starting with black and then only going up, but height would usually start with like a mid-gray and go in both directions. So that's just how I know it. Maybe I'm right about that, maybe I'm wrong, who knows. But then normal maps, of course, have every color represents a direction, either up or down or left or right. And so that's the difference between a normal map and a bump map. Bump maps are just black and white, usually high frequency detail. But since, you know, at this time when they were making this game, and a lot of artists, you know, they just called these normal maps, they were calling them normal bumps or just bump maps. Basically, it's like a color bump or something, whatever. It was getting all kinds of different names by different people. No one knew what to call it, I guess. Eventually, obviously, the normal map name kind of stuck and everybody just called them that, right? Don't call them normal bumps anymore, usually. As far as this environment goes out here, you can see very simple stuff. Big cylinders, some textures laid out. These textures are probably in here somewhere, if I had to take a guess. They're just sized larger. And the skybox, there's no dynamic stuff, anything there. I don't even know if it's a full skybox. It might just be like a half sphere or something like that, quarter sphere, with a texture thrown on it. That's a possibility. Nah, it's probably a skybox. Anyways, so yeah, that's the Doom 3 environment. Give you some things to think about here, how all this is laid out. Alpha transparent texture. The wires are not modeled, apparently. Just lots of cool stuff to look at overall. And to think about, like, how you can maybe create your own Atlas textures and things, perhaps. Now, also a little side note, a lot of these textures are available online. You can actually just go download them in diffuse format, right? Somebody had converted all this to be used in older Doom games so they can reskin Doom with it. Also, I believe the ID Tech 4 engine's open source now. If I read that correctly, I don't know if that's true, but it's a possibility. You can go check into that and see if that's true or not. Yeah, so this engine also ended up being used for Wolfenstein and the first Prey game, Prey 2006 version, which I always liked the intro to that game, where like the bar there and rips apart and stuff like that. So you don't see too many people talk about that game these days. It was still pretty interesting at the time, still fun. Yeah, so some things didn't age so well. This one in particular. But, you know, nobody was really used to working with normal maps, I think, yet at this time, so it was kind of, everybody was getting there, trying to get used to it anyways. Yeah, you coffee guy. Anyways. That's the Doom 3 environment, guys. So, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll check you out next time, alright? Take care.